Josh, can you hear us?
If I said no, would you keep saying stuff?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting to order and have the roll call, please.
Mr. Collins?
Mr.
Yes.
Collins?
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mrs. Yedis? Mr. Regan?
Here.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening and welcome to the November regular meeting of the Alexander Board of Education. Before we adopt the agenda, I'm going to make a motion that we amend the agenda slightly to add an executive session related to the employment of personnel at the end. So I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Yedis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Before we do public participation, I'm going to have Josh, I'm going to have him speak for just a second, but at our last board meeting that evening, we had a tragedy in the community, and it happened to be a young man that took the time to talk to us as a board back in July via Zoom. And I had never met RJ, but I will never forget his face. It was so raw that night, and we didn't say anything, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize RJ this evening. And Josh, I know his boys knew RJ and very well, so I'd like to just quickly turn over the meeting, and Josh is going to speak about RJ.
Thanks, Jay. Really not much to say, unfortunately. I don't want to drag out a lot, but those that knew RJ knew that his wit and his intellect were beyond his years. He was an enjoyable kid to be around. It's obviously a tragedy that none of us can truly comprehend, but I do wish to thank the community for gathering around the family and putting our arms around them and lifting them up as best as possible during that time. And I would encourage the community to continue to do so. We've lost a real treasured kid that will be very missed by his families.
Thanks, Josh. And again, just our hearts go out to the family and continue to lift them up in prayer. At this time, we will entertain public participation regarding agenda items, please. We voted on the amendment and. Okay. All right, Aaron, the question is, we made a motion to amend the agenda, and we voted on that, but now do we have to vote to accept the agenda?
Yeah, you should.
Okay, thank you. Correct. So we will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Yedis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Okay. Blake, thanks for not letting me get ahead of myself. All right, back to public participation. Do we have any public participation on agenda items? Okay, moving along to treasurer's recommendations. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the October 22nd, 2020 regular/special meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. B, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the financial report for the month ending October 31st, 2020.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the following transfers, and again, these are just our normal monthly school-wide pool transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. D, it's recommended the Board of Education accept the following donations from Christ Community Wesleyan Church, $200 to elementary PSSF.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. E, it's recommended Board of Education approve the sub-grant agreement with Waterloo Township for coronavirus relief funds in the amount of $12,000.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
I'll just touch on that real quick. Waterloo Township approached the district about these funds, sub-grant these funds to us. This is money that was allocated to the Waterloo Township, but they could not find any need for that met the allowable expenditures for the grant. So they're allowed to sub-grant those funds to other government entities. And what we did is we took those funds and used them to offset expenditures for classroom dividers and desk dividers that we had purchased, so it saved the district $12,000. So we appreciate that.
So thank you, Waterloo Township. We appreciate the transfer of that grant. Item F, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the enclosed updated 5-year forecast as required by Ohio Revised Code.
And I'll review this with you guys. So, like I say, every year we're required by law to provide an updated forecast every year in November and May, and then anytime in between if there is a significant change to the forecast, whether it's on the revenue side or the expenditure side. Some of the changes, significant changes for fiscal year 21 that you'll see this forecast that's different from the last forecast is our property tax revenue projection for this year is up a little bit. A total for the PUP and the real estate, just a little over 80,000. The projection is up. That's based on new updated property valuations that we received from the county auditor's office, and that's due to the Athens County going through their reappraisal for 2020, for the tax year 2020, which is due in 2021. Another significant change you'll see in the revenues is the income tax projection increase is $276,000 for this forecast over the prior forecast. And the reason for that is not necessarily a belief that our income tax levy is going to generate additional money or more than we thought that it would, especially in light of the coronavirus. But the reason is because of the timing of the payments. If you remember, the Department of Taxation gives you estimates based on historical trends of other school districts who have passed income tax levies. They project or give you averages of the percentage of the amount that was approved of how much that money comes in each quarter. And for whatever reason, Alexander's is trending higher and coming in quicker than other districts. That could be for many different reasons. That could be because maybe we have a district that a lot of our employees are in, have employers who are quicker to put the income tax onto their withholdings for their paychecks, where some other employers may drag their feet and they don't get them implemented in a timely manner. I know, with a lot of people working at the university, school districts, whether it's here, Athens City, Federal Hocking, those government agencies are usually pretty quick about putting the income tax on, so that could be part of the reason why the revenues are coming in a little faster than most districts experience. It could also be that the Department of Taxation's estimate was a little bit off. We won't really know until we get that full year of collections to see that. But based on the trend of the 3 collections that we have received, we bumped up the income tax projection for this year, but then you'll see a corresponding reduction in the following year. Again, that's because our belief at this point isn't that it's going to generate more money, it's just that it's coming in sooner, so it's going to hit this fiscal year instead of next fiscal year. Then the other only significant change on the revenue side is you'll see a reduction in all other category, which that's related to mostly to interest income. As some of you may be aware, interest rates just continued to plummet, and we're getting very, very small amounts of interest income on our cash right now. So from the expenditure side, you'll see some reductions from the salaries. That's related to many different things, but most significantly, that's related to the negotiated agreement that we reached with the unions, where they agreed with a 0% base increase on both of those union contracts, as well as reallocating some of our staff from the general fund into the wellness funds, which would be our school nurse position and our school psychologist position. So that's why you'll see some of the reduction there. The purchase service increase for this year, not surprising, not only Alexander, but almost every school in the state, and especially in the county. We all saw an increase in our community school students. That means kids who live in our district but choose to go and get their education at a community school, whether it's a virtual community school or a brick and mortar community school. More kids are choosing to go get educated at other districts or community schools. I say that's not surprising because there are kids who are choosing to do virtual or online learning, but they're choosing to do it in that platform by going to a different, virtual academy, Ohio Virtual Academy or something like that. So that is the biggest reason for the purchase service increase. So the other biggest significant change there is in the capital outlay. That's mostly due to a reduction in our technology because since we did the Chromebooks district-wide, so there were some planned computer purchases that we decided not to do this year since we did the Chromebooks instead. So that saved the general operating budget in the capital outlay line item. But other than that, that's the significant changes from last year to this year. If you look at the future projections, it's kind of the same story that it's always been. State revenue, flat funded. We'll be talking a little bit later about the new funding formula that's being proposed, and hopefully we'll have some positive news in the future to report on that. But at this point, we're projecting things to remain the same as they have been for almost 10 years now, flat funded. And other than that, if you guys have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
No?
I've already done it.
Good? Okay. Josh, you have any questions for Aaron before we move on?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
We have to reread, or can I just make a motion?
Make the motion.
All right, so moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Moving on to superintendent's recommendations. It's recommended that the Board of Education award a high school diploma to Stephen Patton.
Hey,
Vi-
Gay,
Yes?
tonight, can we have Lindy do a report about how things are going in the school? Should it be now or at the end? We can do it at the end if you want to keep going with business.
What's everybody want to do?
What was the question?
Lucy would like Lindy to give us an update on how things are going in the school. Do we want to do it now or at the end of the recommendations?
I would say the end.
Okay. The end?
Cool, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I want to start over because this one kind of holds a little special place in my belief system, I guess, for lack of a better term, or heart, whatever you want to say. So to start over, it's recommended that the Board of Education award a high school diploma to Stephen Patton, Vietnam conflict veteran, per Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Patton was a student at Shade, I believe, in the late 60s. Did not graduate at the time, but went to serve our country in Vietnam. And my dad is a Vietnam veteran, and I remember to this day, whenever he talks about it, he says, I graduated in May, but 2 weeks later, in 1966, after graduation, that was my present from Uncle Sam, was my draft card. So my dad, fortunately, was able to graduate, but 2 weeks later, he was given his report to wherever for Army. So I would like to thank Mr. Patton for his service, first and foremost. I will make the motion. This one, like I said, military runs in my family. My stepdad's career Navy, dad Vietnam veteran. My wife's family, again, they're retired Navy. My brother now is active on submarines, 24 years plus now. So the military, I have a soft spot for anybody that serves our country. So, Mr. Patton, thank you for your service, and I would make that motion, please.
Second. Does he live locally now?
Yes, he's on Pleasanton Road.
Well, the last time we did this, we brought the family in and presented his diploma. Remember that, Roy?
Yes.
And if he would like to have a ceremony,
We will offer that to him. When he was in the office, we asked him, would you like to come and be part of the presentation? He said, I've done all the paperwork. I'm good. So,
okay,
but we will reach out to him again.
tell him the board would appreciate it if you consider
Sure.
it.
If the people listening at home couldn't hear Fred and Mr. Patton, if you happen to be listening, the board would be honored if you would come to the next board meeting so that we could actually present that diploma to you and recognize your service. If you don't want to, we certainly understand, but that offer does stand.
To May. Whatever he would like, probably.
I think he deserves his
I-
own.
Blake, you bring up something I never thought about, but yes, I have no problem if Mr. Patton would like to come, if we actually are able to have a graduation in May, if he would like to walk across that stage, I don't see why any of us would disagree. I'd be honored as well. Okay.
Okay, we just need a second.
Fred second.
Oh, okay. Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Patton, for your service. It's my pleasure to say yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. B, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the enclosed substitute aid and teacher lists as recommended by the Athens Megs ESC Superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. C, it's recommended the Board of Education employ Cheryl Woodgard as Health Clinic Aide 1, effective October 26, 2020.
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. D, it's recommended the Board of Education employ the following pending their meeting all state and local requirements. We got Madeline Allen, home instructor tutor, Haley Miller, substitute custodian, Dustin Mullen, substitute custodian, Erica Roush, home instruction tutor, and Thomas West, substitute custodian.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes, it's recommended the Board of Education employ the following supplementals for the 2020-21 school year pending their meeting all state and local requirements.
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. It's recommended the Board of Education grant an unpaid leave of absence to David Hawk effective November 2nd, 2020 through December 31st, 2020.
Moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Regretfully, yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnes?
Yes. G, it is recommended the Board of Education approve Sunday, May 30th, 2021, at 1:30 for the graduation ceremony for the class of 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. H, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the enclosed agreement with the Athens County Sheriff's Office.
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. I, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the agreement with the Athens Megs ESC for speech pathology services.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Item J, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding with ALEA regarding mask protocol during the pandemic.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. K, it's recommended the Board of Education adopt the revised policy and procedures manual.
So moved.
Second.
Jay, you want to second it?
Fred beat me to it.
Mr. Collins?
Yes, I am glad to put this thing after a year to bed.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. And item L, it's recommended the Board of Education approve an increase in the rate of pay for substitute teachers to $125 per day effective November 1st, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Okay. Okay, so now business initiated by board members. First, let's get item A out of the way. It's recommended the Board of Education adopt the resolution to endorse the Fair School Funding Plan. Aaron or Lindy, I know, Aaron, you touched on this during your 5-year forecast comments, but one of you, if you would, just kind of give us a debrief on what this is about.
I'll go a little bit, and then I'll let Aaron go deeper. The Fair School Funding Plan originally started as the Cup-Patterson formula. Aaron and I attended quite a few meetings on this formula. They were trying to create a formula with superintendent and treasurer input throughout Ohio to come up with a formula that funds schools more fair across the board. With this funding formula, the key piece for Alexander is, right now we are on the guarantee by 1.8 million. If you calculate Alexander in the new formula, we come off that guarantee. We start to see new state funding. Aaron?
Yeah, this new school funding formula, this is something that the work group actually started working on clear back in 2017. So it's been something that's been in the works for quite some time, but it's really starting to gain some traction now, specifically with Representative Cupp being appointed as the Speaker of the House recently, and him being a major component of this bill. So it's really starting to gain some traction. There's some really a lot of optimism that they may be able to get this done during lame duck, which is pretty rare to see something like that, especially something this significant, something this important to get done during a lame duck session. But they're really pushing to try to make that happen before the end of the year. So all we're doing is passing a resolution showing that as a district and as a board, we support their efforts in this formula. Is it a perfect formula? It's not. I don't think that the perfect formula exists. There's always something that's going to negatively affect some district over here or over there, and then it will help another district over here or over there. So, but as far as what we've seen, I've been in this position for 14 years and seen a lot of different formulas. This formula is one of the best that I've ever seen, and mainly that's because it gives a formula that's easier to understand where they're coming up with the numbers of how they determine how much money should go to each school district in Ohio. So that's, I think, is very important, especially for the taxpayers, to be able to see a school funding formula that they can kind of understand. It's a formula, if you recall, like Mrs. Douglas was saying, the prior formula, as of now, there's actually no school funding formula exists right now as we speak. There hasn't been a school funding formula since the 2018-19 year. Since that year, the state has frozen all districts' funding at that level. So every district in the state of Ohio right now is on what you would call a guarantee, because we're all getting the same amount. So there hasn't actually even been a formula since 18-19. But the last time that we were on the formula in 18-19, we were on the guarantee by 1.8 million. And just to explain what that means a little bit is, under that formula that existed then, when you plug our numbers in, the formula is saying the state is giving our district 1.8 million more than what the formula says we should get. And we all know in our area, that's just not realistic and not accurate. So, and in fact, approximately 80% of Ohio schools were not on the prior formula. So of the 600 plus districts in the state of Ohio, 80% either were on the guarantee, which meant they weren't being formula funded because they were being told that they should get less money, but the state was still giving them a guaranteed amount, or the formula was saying they should get more money, but the state capped them. So the state wouldn't allow them to get the money that the formula actually said they should get. So if you have 80% of your districts that are not even being funded by the formula, it kind of makes you question, well, what good is the formula if it's not even being used to determine how much money each school district gets? Under this new proposal, only 11 districts out of the 600 plus districts would be on a guarantee. So that means all the rest of the districts would be being funded by the formula, which is, I think, is very, very good. So that's my spiel.
Aaron, does that funding formula take effect then July 1st if it passes?
It would still be up to the legislature to determine that. And in fact, given the current environment with the state finances and the state budget and all the uncertainty, we don't even know if this formula would be implemented fully 100% right from day one. It may be something that because I mean, it has its price tag. It's up to the legislature to determine how if they're going to be willing to spend that price tag, or if it's something they want to phase in and say, well, we like the formula. We're going to start using this formula to determine the amounts that we give to each school, but we're only going to implement it at 70%. And then, so whatever the formula says, but then at the 70% rate is what each district would get. However, this formula, like all the other formulas in the past, it also has a guarantee built in so that if they do decide just to phase it in, no district will lose money from state funding.
Okay, so just to summarize, this plan does increase our funding, and actually, for the first time in how many years gets us off the guarantee potentially?
Yeah, 10 in at least 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, if it's fully funded at 100%. So if the legislature said we like this plan, we are going to fund it fully 100%, then we would actually increase, our state funding would actually increase. It's a little less than $20,000. So in the grand scheme of things, we're getting roughly 10 million, little under 10 million from the state, and you're only go up $20,000. That's not a huge bump. But the key is we could start seeing growth year after year after year if the state's economy is doing well, and they start increasing the funding. So, I mean, the way it works under the old formula, if the state says, okay, we're going to give a 2% increase in the base formula per student, Alexander wouldn't see any growth. So the other school districts that are on the formula are getting a 2.2% bump in their funding. Alexander doesn't get any growth. Instead, Alexander just gets a little bit smaller, just a little bit off of the guarantee. So instead of being on the guarantee by 1.8 million, maybe we're only on it by 1.6. But that's how bad and deep we were on the guarantee, that you would have to see so many years of increases before we would even see $1. So the fact that we could get off this guarantee, even if it's only a $19,000, $20,000 increase, the fact that we can get on this formula so that we start seeing some increases, that's significant for our district.
Yeah, so what we're doing here with our recommendation, we're just we're hoping to adopt a resolution that we as a board endorse this plan. Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes. Okay. Lucy, you had this would be the time for your request, I think, be a
Yes.
good spot.
Yes.
We've been in school for a month now. Doors fully open. We have all the students back. There's approximately 320 students that have stayed remote as remote learners. The staff has been working very hard and diligently. Every department's worked very well together. I think things are going well. It's one day at a time, and we focus on this week, and then we'll focus on next week. There's a lot of moving factors that we keep our eyes on: attendance, staffing levels, COVID colored levels of the state of Ohio. We're having weekly meetings with the Athens County Health Department. So the doors are open, the buses are rolling, the kids are in the building. It seems to be going very well. We are all very busy this year. We're just watching. We're just watching and monitoring for now.
I have some questions. How is enforcement of students and staff with wearing a mask? And I don't know if you can really enforce the 6 foot of distance, because that's not really possible, but have there been any students or staff sent home because of continually not wearing a mask adequately?
Once again, 6 foot social distancing is when feasible.
Is what?
6 foot social distancing is only when it's feasible.
Yeah, I know that.
Okay. When we get to the masks, that we've had a couple issues that we've sent students home because they did not have their mask on, and we've addressed those issues. Staff are wearing them vigilantly. If they fall or drop or need a reminder, we take care of that, so that's going well.
And earlier, you had the request of spending more money to hire subs. How, and I know in the teacher's contract, they're only allowed to be asked a certain number of times to sit in on other classes that need watching. What's happening with the sub-levels and what are the numbers?
Right now, Mr. Raines is here also. Every year you have a challenge with substitute teachers and filling all those positions. We've worked very hard to fill all the subs that we need. We have worked with Ohio University to recruit additional subs starting for January. We've locked in 3 full-time subs at the elementary, and at the high school level, I think it was either 3 or 4 we locked in to show up regardless if we needed them or not for this year. And that has been a tremendous help. We call them floaters. They go wherever we need them. If we have a class that needs a sub, they fill in. If we're short an aide, they fill in. So that having those extra people in the building every day has helped with that. We look at substitute staffing every day. I lean on my administrators to tell me when it's getting too tough.
Have we ever hit the point where we're oversubscribed in need for substitutes and not having enough to fill?
What was that?
It's hard to.
Say that again, Josh.
Have we ever hit the point where we're oversubscribed in the need for substitutes and not been able to fill them?
We have been short on teacher subs, and that's where your creativity comes in, where we may use an aide, we may use one of the paraprofessionals from the library. We've asked our teachers to fill in, and most of them have been very good about that. In the union contract, it states they can be paid additionally if they use their planning period and cover a class.
How often have we had to go into that? Whether it's an aide or asking someone to go after planning?
I do not have that answer. That's a day-to-day basis. The sub sheets for payroll have been turned in, but there's a 2-week lag on that.
Okay, so that means we should have at least 2 or 3 weeks of data. Gut feel, is it a day, 2 days a week, 3 days a week?
Mr. Raines, what do you think? Do we use aides as teachers?
How often?
Did he?
I apologize for that on the front side. But, two teachers overheard on the radio that they just hadn't been contacted yet because, you go through 6 through 12. Just a couple of them overheard and they called Susan and said, hey, I've got range 7 and I've got range 6. And I don't know whether they were doing it for me or the kids, but that's like the staff has done. No one's told us, that means sometimes they've given us that only training period they have today to do that. But they all see that need. They've just been a big part of the team concept. So parents are in the same boat. We don't like to ask them to do that, put them out of that. But we've all said the gloves are off and let's do what we got to do. I think we've all.
Yeah, all hands on deck.
All parts of duties, and I don't think anybody has any problem with doing that. But
have we ever pulled teachers from meeting the needs of remote kids to dealing with the kids that are right in front of them? And if so, how often?
I don't think we have. I mean, that would be last resort. We've talked about it.
Unless they're Zooming during their planning period, which some could have done that. And if they do, if they've done that, then some have said, I need to do this before, or I just need to reschedule a Zoom. When they tell me that, I can cover, I'm sure that that has probably happened, but that was going to mean, maybe that's when they're Zoom, but that could create a problem. No one has brought that up to say when I'm leaving that, that's created. If they do, we will certainly, our kind of policy is, sounds something like this. Hey, Ms. Mowry, I know it's your planning period, do you mind covering Mr. Kern's 7th grade PE class? 99 times out of 100, they all say, sure, thank you, I got it. There's on rare occasion, they might say, hey, if there's anybody else you could ask, because I got this planned, or I've got a Zoom meeting, and we go down the line, and we don't start with Melinda and Mowry the next time either. So you're as fair as you can be in an unfair process.
We realize it's very unfair this year.
I just want to compliment the group from, I don't care, from custodial to superintendent, they've done every job. We've all done every job except probably driving the bus, and that's the most, certified job that you can have to be. Hopefully that helps.
I know Rich and Melissa aren't here today, but I have some data from our union meeting today regarding the elementary. And it looks like right now their teachers are at the point that they've all covered about 3 times, which the number that we can be asked up to 8 times per semester. And considering we've only really been in school for 1 month, it's kind of a high number. They also brought up that sometimes students with IEPs, teachers are having to bring the students.
I'm sorry to break in, guys, but there is absolutely no way we can hear any of the conversation that's going on unless it's at the table. Is there any way we can get near whoever's speaking?
Could you go to the mic over here so that Josh can hear you? I apologize.
And I was
I didn't hear anything of what Lee said either, so if anyone's got the Cliff Note version of that, I thought it was going to be a short answer, but it wasn't, and I didn't want to interrupt him.
Can't even hear what he says.
Hey Josh, it's Melinda here. I just was talking
Howdy.
because Melissa and Rich aren't here, and I certainly cannot represent them. But I was at the union meeting this afternoon, and some elementary teachers brought up the concern that they are allowed or can be asked up to 8 times per semester to cover for another teacher. And right now, the number that the teachers are at is 3 times. So considering we've only been in school for 1 month right now, we have about a month left in this semester. They're getting close to that number. They also brought up the concern that sometimes they have to bring their caseload to another class that they are covering. So it would be maybe a teacher who has students, whatever class size with them, and so then they are taking them to another classroom with them. So, and I think that has been addressed. Everyone has been talking about it, but since this is a topic of discussion that you're asking about, so.
I just want to say thank
When
you.
you say take their caseload, does that mean physically moving the kids to?
Yeah, they're physically
combining
taking
2 rooms?
kids- Yeah, like blending a class maybe, so. Another thing, the library has been closed all week this week, so like resources. I know like Mrs. Hanning had to cover, our guidance counselors are covering. So even though it's great, like Mr. Raines is saying, there's also services that students are missing out on, that they can't, if you can't go to the library or if you can't go to talk to your counselor, this is the time all the college applications are due, that kind of stuff. So we're spread pretty thin, we're doing it. But I am concerned about the second 9 weeks in terms of, second 9 weeks is really what, 10 weeks or 11 weeks? That time, and there's not a lot of breaks built in there. So hopefully you mentioned those substitute teachers that more coming from OU students. I know, I've heard some students who are graduating and that, they're gonna get into the sub pool. We need some fresh blood if anyone's listening online. But, so I think that teachers are making it right now. We're ready for Thanksgiving. And that, people are canceling doctor's appointments and other things, and not taking time off because we just know that there will not be a person, maybe, or it's going to be your peer who you don't want to put that extra pressure on them, so.
And we had a lot of conversation this week, the administration and some teachers, about January 1, opening the doors to the student teachers, allowing them to come back to help us with this burden and load. I think that's another resource. We're ready to move on and allow them back in the building to help us, to cover classes, and fill some of the deficiencies we are seeing now. But we've gotten the children in the building, we've brought the staff back into the building, and it is a work in progress. And I think the university has been very open to helping us. We picked up 2 remote teachers through Ohio University. They are teaching fellows, but Ohio University agreed that they will allow those 2 to teach some of our students remotely for us and take the burden off our teachers. So we're coming up with really good creative ways to meet some of the deficiencies. Is it perfect? No, just like the funding formula. But we're all in it together. We're going to work our way through week by week.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying with, I know that some parents and other teachers have expressed concerns about having the Ohio University students here, but the reality is that our high school students work next to Ohio University students. You know, they take classes with them. So I can't obviously speak for everyone, but I think that it should be a consideration that we are a community, and unfortunately, it's here, you know, so we, like Mrs. Douglas is saying, to deal with it and maybe allow those students to come back, because those students can cover classes and alleviate some of that burden as well. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I just want to say, it's very helpful to get the numbers, and it's been very difficult as a board member sometimes to get the kind of numbers that help me evaluate what we're doing and how well we're doing. So anytime you can add numbers is very important.
I just
An
want
earlier comment was made, social distancing when feasible. When is it feasible?
I think you look at the classrooms where we could not get 6-foot social distancing. We came up with the barriers, the trifolds, other barriers to put between students. We have markers on the hallway floors for 6-foot social distancing. We are seating students in the cafeteria, every other seat, to get that social distancing. We have moved many lunches to the gymnasium so students can spread out even more. Doing a fire drill, it may not be feasible during a fire drill. So certain times of the day, but we're plugging away at it.
Be a little more specific. I'm not looking for the fringes. I'm asking about classrooms. Do we have classrooms that are able to meet the social distancing? And if not, what can we meet?
We have classrooms that are 6 feet apart. We have classrooms that are not. And the ones that are not, we worked on getting more teachers in the building, bringing those class sizes down from 25 to 15, and making some more space in those classrooms for students. That seems to be working. If you look at the data, the state data on school districts and the COVID cases inside schools, Blake and I had a big conversation on this. Blake might want to elaborate. Yesterday with the Athens County City Health Department along with EMA, there's not a rise in the schools right now. And my direct question was, what is your advice for schools? You're running this county, what is your advice? And they said, move forward, stay open. It's not growing in the school right now, and your kids are safe there. We know they're safe. I said, would it help to shut the schools down, bring the COVID levels down? They said, right now, you closing is not going to bring that number down. It's what they're doing when they're not at school. So once again, we're watching that very closely. Masking up, having the proper PPE. I know Aaron Sherm worked on ordering $7,000 more of Clorox wipes. So we have those. We're refilling our stock. Masking up, washing up, adding a little more social distance between kids. It's doing okay.
I just wanted to jump on that to say, as Lindy pointed out, I've been diving through data, more data than I ever thought I'm a data person, and I'm almost sick of it. And I just want, the numbers don't lie. And so I just have to say thank you to the community. And that includes not only the families at home, but our staff, certs, non-certs alike, our admins, for stepping up and doing this right. The data shows, you can almost say prove, but the data shows that what we are doing is working. And we need to keep it up outside of school as well. We have a holiday break coming. Make the right choice. Your choice affects everybody. And I just support everything that you've done so far and implore that we keep it up, because being able to finish out 2020 in school depends on it, and finishing out 2021 depends on it. So keep it up. You've done a heck of a job, and it needs to be commended at every level. Just don't lose it. The data shows it. Sorry for getting, I'm tired.
Anybody else? Comments? All right, moving on to public participation on non-agenda items. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Anyone online?
No. Okay. Before we enter into executive session, our next scheduled board meeting is Wednesday. Are you good? All right, good, Blake. So we're back to Wednesday, December 16th for the next meeting. Everybody good? Fred, does that fit your retirement schedule?
As long as I'm home by 10 o'clock.
Yep, we gotta be home by 10:30, so, yeah,
The governor says.
we gotta let Aaron get home by 10, so we're
Yeah,
done
good.
by 9. Okay. If there's no other business, I'd like to entertain a motion to enter into executive session to discuss employment of personnel.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Collins?
Yes, and just a quick question, do we have to read off the full whatever of the 7 reasons before we do it? Or
Personnel.
is it just understood we fit underneath one of the 7 rules?
It was personnel. It was mentioned, Josh.
Yeah, Josh, per Aaron, I mentioned it, it's for the discussion of employment of personnel.
Okay, sorry, I guess I missed that portion, but I'm still yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Yedis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
and Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Where we gonna meet? Where we going, Linda?
I would say probably the teacher's lounge would be the best place. I can take you there.
Okay.
Can we have a
doesn't, if you call me and I don't answer, it's because my phone, I'm gonna have to go get a new one. But it might turn on when I.
Okay.
Time if you'd like.
All right, it's 8:40, and we're back in regular session. I'd like to have a motion for adjournment.
Second. Your turn.
My turn to do what?
Say yes for adjournment.
Oh, for adjournment? Okay, yes.
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 Yes.